The day I found out my wife had been unfaithful was one of the most crushing moments of my life, and it happened on the very same day she was admitted to the hospital. Even now, years later, she struggles to come to terms with the fact that I'm engaged to someone else. If there were a prize for the most painful way to learn that your partner had cheated, I'd be a strong contender. Like many others in this unfortunate corner of the internet, I never expected to end up in this position. What stays with me the most is the tone in my ex-sister-in-law's voice when she called me. She kept repeating, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," and I couldn't make sense of it. I had just gotten back from a week-long work trip and was already exhausted and disoriented. She was clearly distraught, but only after calming her down did I get a partial explanation. My wife had been hospitalized, and I needed to get there as quickly as possible. She said it was because of some kind of assault, then abruptly hung up and ignored all my follow-up calls. Driving to the hospital, I tried to focus on the road while my thoughts ran wild. She had given me almost no details, just that something terrible had happened. To understand everything, you need to know a bit about our history. I met my ex-wife in our mid-20s at a barbecue hosted by a mutual friend. She was stunning, almost surreal in how quietly beautiful she was. She had a gentle, introverted demeanor that made her stand out. It took some time for us to start dating officially, but once we did, I felt like I had hit the jackpot. Our first attempt at intimacy ended with her in tears. At the time, I panicked, assuming I had done something wrong, but the next day, she explained that she had experienced trauma in a previous relationship. She'd been in a long-term abusive relationship, emotionally, physically, and mentally degrading. The memories of that time had left deep scars, and intimacy sometimes triggered those wounds. She assured me it wasn't about me, and I believed her. We took things slowly, and she continued therapy. It wasn't easy, but I loved her and believed that working through this together would bring us closer. A year later, I proposed. I had just bought a house using an inheritance from my late uncle, and everything seemed to be lining up. We were hopeful, even planting a peach tree in the yard to symbolize a fresh start. We got married not long after, and for a while, I thought we were genuinely happy. Of course, we had our challenges. No marriage is perfect, but we made a point never to go to bed angry, and she always made an effort to bring up concerns gently. Then life shifted. I got a promotion that brought in more money, but also meant more travel. Around the same time, I noticed a change in her. She became more withdrawn, less interested in intimacy, and guarded with her phone. She started spending more nights at her sister's house, saying she needed girl time. I brought up my concerns, but she brushed them off, saying she was just going through a rough patch. I chose to trust her. The day everything unraveled, she had said she'd be spending the night with her sister again, but then came that phone call. I rushed into the hospital, desperate and disoriented, asking anyone I saw about my wife. Eventually, a police officer, someone who happened to be a friend of her sister, pulled me aside. He explained that he had responded to a domestic violence call. When he arrived, a man was on top of a woman, hitting her as she screamed. I couldn't wrap my head around it. This couldn't possibly be about my wife. She was married to me. She would never be in that situation. But the officer's calm tone and serious expression told me otherwise. He said the woman was, in fact, my wife. I couldn't even react. I was too stunned. A nurse led me into her room, and what I saw will never leave me. She was almost unrecognizable, her face bruised and swollen, one eye completely shut, her jaw fractured, ribs broken. Then the doctor hit me with another blow. She was pregnant. I felt the world collapse around me. None of it made sense. I couldn't comprehend how any of this had happened. Her sister was there too, avoiding my eyes. The officer urged her to tell me the truth. Tearfully, she confessed that my wife's ex, the man who had abused her, had reached out about 5 months earlier. He claimed he was trying to make amends for his past. Somehow, he convinced her to meet for coffee. That meeting turned into an emotional affair, which eventually became physical. Her sister kept apologizing, saying she had no idea about the abuse in the past. My wife had never told anyone but me and her therapist. I stood there completely numb. I couldn't think, couldn't speak. When my wife regained consciousness and saw me, She broke down sobbing. The months that followed felt like sleepwalking through a nightmare. She went to therapy. We did joint counseling at her family's urging. In those sessions, she opened up in a way I hadn't seen before. She described how the affair unfolded, how much shame she carried, how she hated herself for betraying me. She admitted that after one of their meetings, she felt so disgusted with herself that she considered driving into a river. She said she didn't want to bring his scent into our home. That moment, she said, was when she realized she had to end it. But she was too afraid, too emotionally entangled. It wasn't until she discovered she was pregnant that something inside her snapped. That's when she tried to cut ties. Everything that followed, the hospital, the assault, the police report, was a tragic culmination of her mistake and his violence. And yet, despite everything, despite the counseling and apologies, something in me broke that day and never quite healed. When the truth of her situation finally hit her, she knew continuing any kind of contact with him would only bring harm. Not just to herself, but to the baby growing inside her. She tried to cut all ties in person, but when he lashed out at her, something inside her broke. The confident, loving woman I once knew disappeared. In her place was someone consumed by fear, especially around men, except for me. At one point, she couldn't even go to the bathroom at night unless I held her hand. Things took another turn after our son was born. We had done a paternity test. And yes, he was mine. But the more time I spent with her, the more I realized something painful. I didn't just dislike my wife. I despised her. I no longer saw the woman I had married. I saw someone shaped by another man's cruelty, and I knew I had to leave because I was terrified that staying might cause her to lose control and become someone I didn't recognize, someone like her abuser. She begged me to stay, even went so far as to offer me a hall pass or let me hit her if it helped me get out of my system. That was when I knew I had to walk away. During the divorce, she was surprisingly cooperative. She moved back in with her parents, and we followed the court's co-parenting guidelines closely. 3 years passed, and I met my now fiancé completely by chance. I was in a bookstore, friend, talking about Egyptian mythology, when the stunning woman gently corrected my pronunciation of a few gods' names. Not only was she knowledgeable, she was Egyptian herself. We exchanged numbers, and that meeting turned into a relationship. When I proposed to her, it was in front of a peach tree I had planted years ago. I dropped to one knee, but before I could finish, she ran inside and came back out with a ring of her own. She had been planning to propose to me too, out of pure love and fear of ever losing me or my son. Her ring even had an engraving, "To my Pharaoh." That night should have been one of the happiest of my life. But out of nowhere, my ex appeared, soaked by the rain, furious, shouting about how I dared propose in front of our tree, saying it symbolized the end of us. I was already emotionally drained by her ongoing harassment. I couldn't completely cut contact because of our son, but she had become a relentless source of stress for both me and my fiancé. I was lost on how to get her to finally let go without resorting to legal measures. Something she once said haunted me, that she gave time and love to a man who abused her, only to end up in an even worse situation. It made me wonder, do people who've been abused often still crave attention from their abuser, even if they hate them? I forgot to mention that when my fiancée gave me her ring, she had already planned to propose to me. It made that moment even more special. After sharing my story online, I got some powerful feedback. One user, Coffee, offered advice that struck a chord. They said the only proper answer to my son's birthday request should have been a firm no. They pointed out that kids get over disappointment, and that there were countless ways to celebrate without putting my fiancé in an awkward position. They were right. My ex had been crossing lines, and I'd been letting it happen for her too long. If I didn't establish stronger boundaries, I'd end up with more problems. Maybe even 2 exes instead of 1. Thanks to another helpful comment from a user named Mama22045, I found solution to the birthday issue. My son wanted a camping-themed party and asked my ex to sleep over so he could recreate a scene from his favorite adventure show with both his parents. I didn't want to disappoint him, but I also knew it wouldn't be right for my ex to share a tent with me and my son. Even though my fiancée said she understood, I could tell she wasn't okay with it. My ex, however, clearly enjoyed the situation. She made over-the-top comments about spending the night with her two favorite guys and brought enough camping gear to shame Bear Grylls. I had to shut her down a few times, and she only toned it down when I threatened to invite her sister, the one she blamed for her bad decisions during our marriage and whom she refused to let near our son, which devastated her sister and drove her into depression. Taking Mama 22045's advice, I bought a large multi-room tent so my fiancée could be involved without sharing a space with my ex. My ex wasn't thrilled, but she accepted it. My son was beyond excited. He spent the whole day playing Explorer in the backyard. That night, we lit a fire, roasted marshmallows, and took pictures. At one point, after making esmores with me and his mom, he handed a marshmallow to my fiancée and chose to sit with her while making another. It was a surprisingly sweet and peaceful moment, proof that something good really could come from such a chaotic past. Later, my ex pulled me aside and asked to talk. We went to the kitchen, where she apologized for the outburst on the day of my proposal, though not for everything that came after. She told me that in her heart, I was still her husband, and that the thought of me loving someone else was unbearable. She said she never meant to hurt me, and that she cherished the confirmation that I was our son's father. It made her believe we had a second chance. I thanked her for being honest, but I told her clearly that I was happy with my life and the woman I was with. I said I hoped she'd find peace and love someday too. Then she reminded me of her words from the day of our divorce, how she would wait for me. I walked out of that kitchen feeling drained and defeated, knowing she still hadn't let go. That night, my fiancée and I slept in one part of the tent while my ex and our son slept in another. And although it was exhausting and tense at times, it ended up being a great birthday for my son. And for that, I'm grateful.